The other day I made a video talking about Mike Jackson, who was one of the weirdest cases of a UFC career. But another weird career, which also is on that is actually also a part of Mike Jackson's career, is the career of Dean Barry. Now, Dean Barry getting signed to the UFC in the first place is a bit puzzling. Now, he did have a kickboxing background and was a world champion in karate and all these things, but when he got signed to the UFC, originally he was meant to be signed in 2021, and he was only 3-1, which was a bit of a puzzling signing. He was booked against Mike Jackson, who we all know about Mike Jackson. It was puzzling at the time, and then the fight didn't end up going ahead, and then the UFC ended up not signing Dean Barry. He then went on to beat a 6-30 guy in Titan FC, which then resulted in him getting re-signed to the UFC and getting his fight against Mike Jackson. Now, we all know about the eye gouge, and we all know about him being cut after that. But what we don't know is why the UFC even signed him in the first place. And I think I've genuinely figured out why the UFC signed him, and I think it all comes down to a case of mistaken identity. So Dean Barry started his career as a featherweight, then fought at lightweight. He lost to Anthony Taylor when he was 2-5. So also to add that on to them signing him being weird, that they signed him after losing to a 2-5 Anthony Taylor, who everyone knows for his misfit fights. So that was a weird case there. But he was a career lightweight. He had a catchweight bout of 163 against Abdullah Al-Bushiri, which he ended up winning in UAE Warriors. And then after he had been originally signed to the UFC against Mike Jackson, he ended up taking a fight against Drew Lipton, who was 6-30 at welterweight, because the UFC wanted him as a welterweight. Now, logically, I genuinely think the whole reason that they signed this guy is they confused him with Ian Gary. Dean Barry, Gary, Barry. Now, I don't know how they managed to do this, but it's the only thing that would make any logical sense, as this man was a career lightweight and had a fight at featherweight, and they wanted him at welterweight. So obviously, whoever signed him or whoever was behind the signing, they confused him with Ian Gary, as Ian Gary is a welterweight, an Irish welterweight with the last name ending in Re. So I genuinely think that that's the only explanation that would explain why Dean Barry got signed to the UFC. Now, if that's not the case, which I actually think that's the case, then there's no other reason why they would sign him, as he didn't really have a big following. Like, I've spoken to a lot of people who, they know all the prospects and everything, but they had never heard of Dean Barry before he got signed to fight Mike Jackson. So it's just a really strange case. And after the Mike Jackson fight, Dean Barry was booked in all these different matchups that didn't come to fruition. And the reason I'm also making this video is Dean Barry actually fought yesterday. And he was meant to fight at a catchweight, I believe, of 160. But he ended up missing weight by quite a lot, and actually missed the welterweight limit somehow, even though he used to be a featherweight and a career lightweight. And yeah, he looked really out of shape in his fight against John Marquez at Titan FC. It was a kickboxing only match as well, which, as a world champion kickboxer, you would have thought that he would have won that. But it seemed like he injured himself like early into the fight, but he also came in looking really out of shape. And yeah, this is just a really strange case of why was he ever in the UFC? Like it's going to be a weird thing to look back at. Like, from years from now, people will look back at why was this guy in the UFC in the first place. And Yeah, at the end of the day, it is just a weird case of mistaken identity, I believe. And maybe one day we'll find out that maybe he was friends with Mick Maynard like Mike Jackson was, and maybe that's why he got signed to the UFC. But I generally think because they made him fight at welterweight, even though he's not even big for the weight class. So my only explanation would be that they generally confused him with Ian Gary. And if that's the case, that's pretty fucking funny in my opinion. Because yeah, I can't see why else they would have signed this guy. But yeah, I'll keep this brief. Like this isn't going to really be a long video. I just thought that this is the only explanation I could come to, to believe, because there's no other reason why Dean Barry should have been signed to the UFC. Like, I don't have a problem with the guy. Like, I don't think he's a bad guy by any means. I just don't think he was ready for the UFC, and now I think that's probably messed him up a little bit. Like, that would explain all the pullouts. He was meant to fight in karate combat as well, and he didn't. It just seems like it maybe mentally broke him getting cut from the UFC. You know, a lot of these guys, they strive for a while and it's their dream and everything. But yeah, I think him being cut from the UFC broke him. I don't think he has the motivation like he used to. But hopefully he finds that, and hopefully he proves me wrong and maybe makes it back to the UFC and goes on a run or something. But yeah, this is just a really weird case of a UFC signing that I just felt like I had to make a video on, because yeah, it's odd, especially because Ian, was Ian Gary in the UFC at the time? Yeah, he debuted in 2021. So yeah, it's weird that they re-signed Ian Barry as well. So but I think originally when they signed him in like 2020, 2021, I think they actually thought he was Ian Gary, and then I guess because they had already signed him and everything, they were just like, well, we've already signed him. He's won now, so we might as well re-sign him. But I think this all began with the case of mistaken identity. So thanks for listening to this video. I know it's not like the most full-on topic. It's a really random topic, but it's just it makes a lot of sense to me. So I just felt like talking about it. But yeah, please comment, like, subscribe, put notifications on, because I'll be always making these videos. And yeah, thanks.